Hey everybody, Phantom139 here, and welcome back to my Destiny Thoughts series, the State of Destiny 2, March 2020 edition. So, this video will cover my final closing thoughts on Season 9, which was Season of Dawn, and give my initial feelers for Season 10, Season of the Worthy, from the perspective of the 2 weeks we've had so far. So, with that, let's go ahead and dive right into it. So, we'll start with some key point recaps from December. So, in case you missed the last video or don't feel like going to watch that 30-minute video, we hit the critical points of Season 8 and the launch for Season 9, which covered basically the sandbox adjustments, or nerfs if you want to say that, and the closing thoughts on the blunder that was the final assault. We also went over the initial push of the endless bounty loop that was starting to become a problem in Season 8, and once again was happening in Season 9, and guess what? It's still a problem in Season 10. I also hit the critical notion that PvP, just the general Crucible, is not an in-game activity. I still stand by this to this date. It should not offer pinnacle level rewards. We'll talk about trials separately later on, but for general PvP, so I'm talking your quick play, competitive playlists, this stands, so no pinnacle rewards. I also recapped the blunders of the seasonal title grind that happened in Season 8, although this was quite a bit fixed with Season 9, and for Season 10 anyways, that's not at all a problem, but we'll cover the problem of why that is the case. And the FOMO component, everyone's talking about FOMO right now, fear of missing out. And Eververse becoming too predominant in the game again. A lot of these things are still true, but maybe not as much so, with the exception obviously of Eververse, but knowing Bungie, that's not going to change. So that basically covers the recap points from the December video. So let's go ahead and jump into today's video topic, which is going to be a kind of full recap of Season 9. So we'll go over it in the exact same format as last time. We're going to start with the blunders of Season 9. So again, we're going to focus on the critical points of failure in the season. So basically things that I think need to be highlighted for the future year of Bungie to understand what went wrong and how to avoid it moving forward. Alright, drum roll, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to announce the worst offense of Season 9. And the winner goes to Corridors of Time. Obviously, I had to do a whole video on the Corridors of Time puzzle event. This just was executed terribly to the point that the day after it launched, I had to do a video on this. So, key issue. Bungie, don't put a community effort puzzle into the game and then publicly announce the reward on the seasonal roadmap, and then only announce the very next day that the reward would have been released regardless of the community input. Expectations here was that this was a hidden puzzle, therefore the reward would be a hidden element, and this is what really needs to be the focus moving forward in time. Execution of the puzzle itself was fine, the rewards were terrible, and again, this is a problem that this game is still facing, is that the rewards are terrible, but we'll talk about that here in a bit. Second offender of Season 9 was the lack of any in-game level pursuits for PvE, and the problem was that Season 9 was really what I would call a season for the casual player, with absolutely nothing in the in-game pursuits to be had in the season. Now, sure, you could argue that there was a Legend Sundial, but for most players, this was hardly a challenge. It was just Sundial with a couple of modifiers, and you had to get your own team to do it. But again, anyone could have hopped on LFG and picked up a team and did it very easily. Number 3, the quote-unquote slot machine. This was the Empyrean restoration effort. Now, the event itself was kind of a cool concept on paper. You bring the community together, and unfortunately, like everything else that Bungie has done so far, it fell flat. So there was quite literally an arbitrary counter into the game that says, you need to donate more Fractaline. And what's going to happen? Well, we're not going to tell you. There's going to be some rewards tied to the tiers, but that's about it. And they didn't really specify anything other than the tier rewards was just a nice little counter and some little graphical elements at the tower on this Empyrean Restoration tower thingy. The final reveal was, oh, hey, look, Trials is coming back. Whoop-de-doo. Also, I should also mention that this made obtaining weapons easy to the point where you could literally sit in the tower and push a few buttons and get weapons. You literally had to do nothing in the game, and that just sapped all of the fun of the season away. Finally, number 4, you guessed it, bounties. The activity reward loop is still in a very terrible place in this game. Playing the game at this point without doing bounties is a detriment to your own progression in the season. This needs to be fixed. It needs to happen yesterday, Bungie. You need to make activities the forefront of the game once again. And we'll get to my thoughts on how this can be accomplished here in a little bit. So that's kind of the focus of the blunders of Season 9. Now, thankfully, it wasn't anywhere near as bad as Season 8's blunders. Sure, we had the quarters of time failure, but the actual final event of the season with the boss was really well executed, and I'll commend Bungie there later on in my section for the positives. But I want to shift gears now, and we're going to talk about the PvE endgame per se. Now, I can hear it already. The voices echoing the heads. Oh no, Phantom, that means you're going to lecture us for another hour on raids. Well, no. What I mean is the endgame, as in what you do as a player of Destiny 2 once you've completed the game, and you've geared up enough such that your powerful drops are now reaching the pinnacle levels. So, how this works is right now, it's 2 categories. There's pinnacle gear and artifact level. Outside of being the gate to high tier activities such as master level content and soon to be released grandmaster level content, your power level does very little in the game, and unfortunately it's a shame. The PvE endgame should be about becoming so powerful to the point that you can shred through hordes of weak alien mobs with not as much as a drop of sweat coming from your character. It should be about building into your armor and your weapons that become more powerful as you do this by investing into your armor and weapons. Now, this has very many components, but the gist of my point here is that level scaling should be a thing of the past in Destiny. It only serves to ensure that you don't blaze through some content that Bungie hasn't properly scaled to experience gains. But this is where I come in and say, so what? If anything, I feel like Bungie ought to take a page from their fellow developers over at Massive, who just released the first expansion to the Division 2. In their case, every activity in the game has various difficulty options that scale the enemies based on the difficulty. There's story mode, there's normal mode, hard, challenging, heroic, and legendary. And each of these kind of raises the tier of enemies based on what you choose. And there's also group scaling, such that your player counts in your fire team or your squad in that game don't outlevel the content. Unlike Destiny, there's no player scaling limits. If you jump into a normal mode mission with maxed out gear in the Division 2, you can literally steamroll the mission without even breaking a sweat while enemies run in fear from you. At higher difficulties, however, you need to hide and cover, otherwise the enemies will just laugh at your endless charade of bullets and drop you with a single pistol shot. Higher difficulties scale up the enemies to be more powerful than you. That introduces the level of challenge to the game. But at the same time, what the Division does a lot better than Destiny here is that it makes the rewards worth doing these high-level content. The higher difficulty you play, the better quality rewards you get from the game. At the moment, I think Destiny might struggle to fully implement a similar system because light level is the only differential factor of influence here on your incoming and outgoing damage, whereas the Division has numerous player stats on armor and weapons that influence all of these statistics. All in all, I think the end goal here is that Destiny needs to have more of the show-off side of the RPG game come into the light. Something that in-game players can reach out and show the newer players, this is what you have to look forward to. This is what you're going to be able to do when you reach my level. And unfortunately, Bungie, this means dropping the fear of angering the casual. In-game content in Destiny should reward in-game gear and in-game levels, period. What I mean by this is that means the absolute best items in the game with most powerful perks and abilities that are completely differentiated from everything else and is outclassing everything else must come from in-game activities. Basically, casual players get mad about this, Tough. If you don't raid, you don't deserve raid rewards. End of story. Once again, for the PvE side of the game, doesn't matter. Competition doesn't exist in PvE. It's non-existent outside of the hardcore community for challenges such as day 1 raiding, but then again, with contest mode, that isn't a problem either. I talked a little bit about this in the last video, but the loot needs to become more rewarding and more meaningful. Monotonous bounty grind is only made worse by monotonous weapon and armor pieces that do nothing to make players feel stronger. Every weapon can effectively be the same thing because the only thing you're chasing is perk rolls. And this is one of the problems that Bungie has faced so far, is perk metas. They can't seem to shake these metas for fear of a power creep setup. But Bungie is failing to understand that in some cases, the easiest way to topple a meta perk is to just make stronger variants that introduce a trade-off factor. So what do I mean by that? Again, we're going to go back to Division 2, because they did this really well. At the initial launch of the game, they didn't really succeed at this perfectly, but they have since adapted this to the point where it is now in a really great place. The way Division 2 does this is each weapon has mods that you can equip to them to customize this. Now, each mod offers a specific bonus to a stat. Now, there's two types of these mods. There are general purpose mods that give a kind of a small bonus. Now, you could think of these as a meta perk in the game right now. But then there's another mod that's an even stronger version of it. So it gives even stronger bonuses, but you have to trade off something. So for instance, you could have a scope that gives you plus 20% accuracy, but you lose 10% reload speed for doing that. So how could Bungie do this? Well, let's take Kill Clip, for example. Well, what if they introduced a special hand cannon perk called Hyperpower Shot, where you reload after a kill and you get hyper-powered shots into the magazine. It has substantially increased damage, but it lowers your weapon stability, and when you fire, you lose 2 rounds instead of 1, and then the bonus is lost every few seconds. See, I already fixed your problem there. You now have a perk that can compete with one of the top tier perks, but you have to consider the trade-off effects. And now players will have to start scratching their heads about, do I want to go for Kill Clip or do I want Hyperpower Shot? Right there, you start to diversify the chase element of the game. Additionally, I think it's time that you go back to making enemy-specific perks. Yes, I know, people dreaded shank burn on their assault rifles. But let's say we had something a little more general, like Mechanical Breaker, which increases outgoing damage to any mechanical enemy. Now you can see here, this would include numerous enemy factions at this point and numerous enemy types. So the utility aspect of that suddenly becomes a lot more interesting. And at this point, I feel like you could have those be your general purpose mods and then bring back a shank burn perk, but make the burn effect be a lot stronger than before. So all in all, it's really easy to diversify the perk base. Now I know people are still attached to their damage and reload perks, but I feel like you don't have to completely reinvent the wheel here. I know weapon retirement is a big topical point that everyone's getting on about right now, and I'm on the boat where I think we need to get more information from Bungie about what this is going to mean before any kind of decisions are dropped. All in all, I think a Weapons 2.0 revamp should be in the works, where guns can start to have randomized stats as well as randomized perks. That would make the system behave a lot more like the Division and make weapon chases a lot more worthwhile than just chasing perks. Alright, Bungie, also, please fix the bounties. I don't know what kind of bounty fetish you're living in right now, but it is making the game so stale and repetitive to the point where signing in and playing the game feels so dull and unengaging that by the end of a play session, I'm having regrets turning on the game in the first place. I mentioned this in the last video, but activities need to become the forefront of the game. Adjust the scaling such that higher difficulty content gives representative EXP amounts to match the amount of effort that is put into the game. And this goes for everything in the game. Don't just do this for trials. I know you have your stupid passage thing, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. but this needs to apply to the whole game, not just one part at a time. Oh, and finally, one last thing. Sandbox team, you thought you were getting away from me. Oh, no, 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 no. Stop nerfing every best PvE combo because, oh, we have snipers. They're too safe. How about you look at the why factor of things? Why do players prefer to use sniper rifles over a shotgun in the game, for instance? Maybe focus your efforts on fixing that problem. Like, oh, I don't know. Maybe the fact that bosses can kill you instantly with a slam, or enemy melees can knock out 75% of your health with one hit, and that their melees recharge faster than you can hit them once? Yeah, how about that? Who wouldn't use a ranged weapon in this situation? Fact of the matter is, Sandbox team needs to really get their fingers out of the game in an area that they're not familiar with. Leave the fixing to the encounter teams first, the combatant teams after that, and then if there's still problems there, then we might be able to tweak a sandbox item there. So my point is the quote-unquote nerfs that you impacted in Season 10 need to be reverted, and they need to be reverted ASAP. All right. So all in all, that's my thoughts on the PvE endgame as it exists right now. So again, there are some things that need to be fixed, and they need to be fixed soon. That leads into the launch of Season 10. So how has the launch of Season 10 gone? Well, the Cabal are back again. Yay, I guess. And their sole plan this time is, oh, those Guardians stopped us at Mercury. We need to throw the Almighty at the city. Oh boy, what are we going to do this time? Let me think. Let's get Rasputin to help us. How do we help Rasputin? We need to build our satellite arsenal, Guardian. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is through bounties and public events. Yeah. It doesn't really sound fun and engaging, folks. I'm going to be honest. I was really looking forward to the launch of Season 10 after the whole Season 9 fiasco that we had. And the fact that Bungie actually changed the outlook on Season 10 to have more of a hidden roadmap, so we didn't really know everything, circa fixing the Corridors of Time blunder, and even looked to be a bit more to do this season. Unfortunately, I signed in on the first day and was greeted with that old-fashioned wall of grinding that took the forefront in the form of, oh, you guessed it, ladies and gentlemen, bounties. Season 10, literally a repeat of Season 9, but instead of doing sundial runs, we're going to do daily bunker cleanups and public events. That's it. Oh, and I forgot, if you're feeling a little bit brave, you can go tackle a power level 1000 legendary lost sector. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's your season right there. There's literally nothing else to bother doing. There's not even a match-made arena this time around. So if you don't like public events, I've got bad news for you. Oh, I should also mention this public event is incredibly finicky. With even the slightest tap of an enemy into the hold zone you have to guard, instantly screws you over for the entire event. And they also like to throw hordes of invisible fallen at you that can literally slip by you and stand in the zone, not even shooting at you until after, you guessed it, you failed the guarding mechanic. Also, Bungie, what's going on with matchmaking? Why is it always placing players who can't properly use thumbsticks into my session, making the event incredibly challenged? Especially the fact that one of the seasonal triumphs requires a completely perfect run of the event. Yeah, that's right. Have fun, community. Have fun getting your new title. And finally, did I mention that Bungie decided that for some ungodly reason, playing a few Crucible matches every week and completing a weekly playlist strike objective should now give pinnacle level rewards? Oh, yeah, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Pinnacle level literally means nothing anymore. This is one of the problems that I mentioned in Season 9, feeling like the game was starting to push towards the casual player, And this is a terrible move that I really, really cannot say that I'm more opposed to. Like, this is absolutely the worst thing that they could do for pinnacle levels in this game. Oh, I can hear it now, though, ladies and gentlemen. I can hear those voices. Oh, Phantom. Trials. Oh, but Trials, Phantom. It's here. It's going to save us all. Let me tell you something. So the old PvP mode from Destiny 1 returns to Destiny 2, and there's literally nothing changed about it. But it's what made the game so popular. Twitch viewership is through. I'm gonna stop you dead right there. Twitch viewership is not a metric of a game's performance. It is simply a collection ground of players watching someone whose content they enjoy, or someone who's watching hoping at a chance of earning something by watching said streamer, which in the case of Trials is usually a carry to a flawless run. Oh, and speaking of popularity, did I mention that if I take the entire game's population from yesterday alone, which is about 1.8 million, and divide it by the total number of players who engaged with Trials this weekend, which was a little over 230,000, you get 14% of the player base. Yeah, that's a very popular mode you got there, folks. It's below Gambit Prime in engagement, by the way, which for the record still sucks. Trials is a toxic cesspool of the game's worst. Hardly anything to be proud of. And worse yet, some people still have the nerve of thinking that this is the best part of the game. People, Destiny has never been a PvP game or a PvP franchise. It never will be a PvP game or a franchise of PvP. We already saw what happened to Destiny when PvE took a side seat for the season. The entire player base nearly collapsed and game engagement sunk to record lows not seen since Curse of Osiris, which was Destiny 2's first and also worst expansion. PvE always needs to be at the forefront of the game, period. There's literally no getting around it here. This game was built with the story and PvE in mind. PvP is nothing more than an afterthought. It's always been that way, something that can be played on the side for some enjoyment. It's not what drives this game under any circumstance. It's never going to. The problem here is that Bungie loves to push this hyper-competitive notion of the game. Every match needs to be as competitive as possible, a sweatfest. This does nothing to help the game. It drives player engagement further down, and it's the reason why your competitive playlist collapsed to the point where Bungie had to introduce rank floors. Even then, engagement with that playlist is still very bad. The notion that Bungie is pushing that every PvP match needs to be some esports level final is the reason why PvP is never going to go anywhere in this franchise, and why it will remain to be the grindstone of all the complaints of this community. Oh, and for sweet lord, should PvE players get even one drop or metric that's better than what a PvP player can get, the community goes into a freaking outcry with Reddit threads like, oh, 1,000 upvotes, give PvP pinnacle rewards. Cry me a river, PvP player. You are playing a PvE-centric title. Get over it. We get your insults thrown at us all the time whenever there's a PvP objective in Exotics. Oh, just get good and play PvP. Hey, guess what, PvP players? You want top-tier rewards? Get good and play PvE. End of story. So, no, ladies and gentlemen, Trials is not going to bring this season anywhere. Brings no positives to the game, and in the current state, it's not going to do that either. Bungie really just needs to drop this hyper-competitive notion. Just make it focused on the social aspect of gaming. Just make engagements focus on having fun. Every game doesn't need to be an ultra-competitive experience. That's just going to continue to drive player engagement down. So you watch those numbers. It's going to do the exact same thing it did last time. Oh, it'll be popular at first, but it's going to quickly sink. So let's get off of this ranty topic because, again, rants are fun, but after a while they get boring and you get to say the same thing. So let's cap with some positives that Bungie really did well with. As I mentioned before, Bungie did a really good job with the execution of the puzzle with Quarters of Time. Getting the community involved on that scale is definitely something that they really should try to do more. Also, the change to how seasonal mods work this time was a step in the right direction, although I really feel that Bungie just needs to go all in at this point and do away with seasonal mods and just convert them to general mods, and then give all armor pieces a second seasonal mod slot. Well, at this point, it'll be a general mod slot. I know a lot of people don't like what they did to emblems because their stats are gone. I like this new system. I do agree that Bungie should have waited until all the old stats were compatible, but let me remind everyone that they've already said that every stat is still saved and they're working on bringing them back. It's gonna come back. You didn't lose anything, folks. Finally, the execution of the story elements in Season 9 have been fantastic. The new missions were some of the best I've seen in a long time, and I really love the development that they brought into the game. If we can continue to get these moving forward, I think their game will do fine. So now we're going to look ahead to what's happening next in the game. So this was just a brief recap of Season 9 and a brief intro into Season 10. Unfortunately, it really feels as if my expectations are even lowered to the point where I feel like they're low enough. Bungie somehow is capable of making those expectations look some kind of a fairy tale reality in comparison. Also, is this deja vu, ladies and gentlemen? Literally this time last year, I was pushing out my Season of the Drifter video, and I had a little nub on it that said just skip it with a calendar pointing to the next season's launch date. And it really feels like we're doing the same thing again. Have we learned nothing, Bungie? Season 9 was bland on the PvE side of the game, especially the fact that there was no endgame. And the whole slot machine grind with Fractaline led to a colossal bore settling in with any lack of challenge for the game's most engaged players. Once again, I'm forced to draw these same conclusions that Bungie did a few things right, but it seemed like for each thing they did right, they did two things wrong. As it pertains to the launch of Season 10, Bungie had every notion of a warning on why not to do a PvP-focused season from Season of the Drifter. It was a colossal failure that killed player population and engagement with the game in the long term, and was only recovered by Season of Opulence's popularity. I've already demonstrated why the whole Trials is back means absolutely nothing. It's hardly popular and nowhere near as engaged as the launch of D2's Trials or D1's first weekend of Trials for each of its launch weekends. Unfortunately, you combine all of these things together and the future of the franchise is starting to look a bit dim. It's a crying shame how very minor changes to swing the pendulum back from this monotonous grind of a game that favors casual and kinda want to push its PvP a bit more to the forefront to more of a game that favors the RPG MMO style elements with an involved endgame grind and PvE-focused challenges and aspects of the game that make the grind worth it when you actually get to that point, would make the game feel leagues better. But knowing what Bungie has done, we can only sit back and look at what could have been. I really hope that the Grandmaster Nightfalls that are coming later in the season live up to the expectation that it now has before it, and I truly hope that the game's absolute best loot is locked behind it. Anything short of that, and it will be seen as a failure by pretty much anyone who plays in-game PvE. So, that's all she wrote for March. Season 10's only just starting, but things aren't really looking good. I know this one was likely done around the time Season 8 was being pushed out the door, but there are so many indicators that Bungie had well in advance of this season to see why the big red abort button really needed to be slammed and a shift in direction of the season needed to be pushed. The bunkers are okay, it gives a little bit of a grind to the game, but it really feels meh to any kind of element of the game right now. It really feels meh to be a PvE player right now. All of the best tools have been nerfed once again, and there is no meaningful challenge to undertake. And now the PvP whiners have irked their way into Pinnacle loot without playing any Pinnacle activities. Barring any kind of major reversal or Grandmaster Nightfalls knocking it out of the park, this season will easily be on par to match the unpopularity Season of the Drifter. You can mark my words on that, folks. I do continue to want to make these videos, and I do plan on doing another one at some point in the future. Hearing the constant barrage from Bungie of "we're listening" is starting to mean little to nothing. My hopes for the future of this franchise are very quickly dimming, and it's clear that major leadership changes at Bungie are going to be needed for any kind of reversal on the game's current trajectory. I will probably do another video about midway through the season when we get Grandmaster Nightfalls to see if anything has changed my mind about things, but don't hold your breath. So, with that in mind, we're going to conclude with my final ratings. And for Season 9, Season of Dawn, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Again, it was a very meh season for the endgame, but at least the story elements were positive. We had a really good community-involved effort with Corridors of Time, even though Bungie screwed it up with the rewards. The season as a whole, it was engaging enough to the point where you could play a lot, but the meh factor really started to push in later in the season, and that's why I dropped some points on that. Season 10, no surprises here. It gets a very, very low mark here. 3 out of 10. This is once again a deja vu to the exact same rating I gave Season of the Drifter at launch. This is not going to be a good season unless Bungie has some major shakeups in what's going to happen. And unfortunately, if they don't have some surprises in store for Grandmaster Nightfalls and reverse their course on some of the notions that I've referred to earlier in this video, we're going to have some problems engaging the hardcore player, and you're going to see a lot of them leave this game, especially as the season really doles out. So that's all I've got for the state of Destiny 2 right now. Again, I really wish I could do more positives, but can't really help that if Bungie's not getting what I'm saying. So, if you stuck around, thanks a lot. And comments or ratings here would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I will see everyone next time.